Hello, everyone. It's exactly 5:30 p.m. in Singapore today. We know that some of you you were trying to join at 4 p.m., but as we announced, via the e-learning platform and email, today's time is a bit different. So hopefully, you quickly realize that and you are here now. Thank you so much for your flexibility. Really appreciate it. And welcome to the last thematic webinar of your self-learning phase. So today we will, of course, learn about the effective AI topic. And for that, we welcome you all if you are joining us from Europe together with our speaker today. Hope you are having a good morning. And if you're joining us from Asia, hopefully you are having a good afternoon. And if you are joining from New Zealand and Australia, we hope that you are having a good evening. So with that, let us very quickly share the agenda for today. Of course, we will very briefly introduce our speaker today, and then you will have the presentation by our speaker, and then question and answer session on the topic first. And then later we will, Inji and I, we will be here for a while in case you have any questions, since this is the last thematic session. And we have an exciting announcement, and then you will learn about that as well at the end of this session. So about our speaker, we are very fortunate to have Professor Mutlu Chukuruba to deliver this session. Why? He has done a lot of impressive work in the field of AI in education. At UCL, he designs AI and education related education programs, and he leads them as well. And one of the key work that we want to highlight for him is he is the co-author of the UNESCO AI competency framework for teachers. As you know, we have been following that framework throughout this whole journey, and that framework is a crucial part of your innovative teaching practice design when you go to the team learning phase. So for that, today you have the opportunity to directly hear from the author of the framework. So please pay attention to the presentation and prepare your questions for him as well at the end of his presentation. Without further ado, let us welcome our speaker for today, Professor Mutlu Chukuruba, Professor Learning and Artificial Intelligence at Institute of Education, University College London in the United Kingdom. Professor Chukuruba, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joyce. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this kind introduction and invitation. I am absolutely honored to be part of this discussion and this webinar. I have been looking at some of the webinars and previous presentations from Asia Europe Foundation, and I found them extremely relevant and interesting. I hope today's session will not be an exception to this trend. I was asked to reflect upon the question on the effectiveness of AI in education, and perhaps a little bit more from the academic perspective with regards to existing evidence and research studies, because being able to judge whether such a prevalent tool is effective in education is an extremely important part of practice. In order to be able to give confidence to the practitioners with regards to their implementations of AI, we need to be able to generate relevant evidence about the effectiveness, but also the ethical implications of the use of these technologies. Now, you might realize that my title is slightly different. And the reason behind this is that such a broad question, like whether AI in education is effective or not, at least to me, as a professor in this area for the last 2 decades, and looking at the literature in AI in education for at least 4 decades of work, such questions are way too broad to be considered. It's a little bit like asking questions on whether electricity is effective in education, whether a broad tool that has been designed for generic purposes is effective in education or not. A lot of these discussions with regards to effectiveness actually relates to the ways in which these tools are designed and deployed by the practitioners in their real-world practice. So depending on the way these tools are conceptualized, they are used, the evidence of impact with regards to effectiveness will change significantly. And today I want to talk about three different conceptualizations of AI in education, starting from these arguments that relates to the replacement of particular tasks with the help of AI technologies. And these are the conceptualizations of stochastic parrots. Maybe some of you might have heard about these. The stochastic parrot argument actually comes from a fairly well established research article in our field that essentially argues that these large language models like ChatGPT are probabilistic token prediction models that are regurgitating what has been fed into them in their data set, just like a stochastic, a probabilistic parrot would regurgitate the input that the parrot has been hearing. On the other hand, you can think about these technologies as synergistic partners. And this is the conceptualization where the humans and AI are working in complementarity manners, building upon each other's strengths and mitigating each other's weaknesses in order to be able to generate synergy so that the emergent intelligence of human AI combinations is larger than the sum of each agent's intelligence. That's why the title gets into these kind of distinctions, and I will try to present some evidence on these different conceptualizations, both from my own lab's work, but more broadly in the field as well. Now, everyone is talking about AI, right? I think it's quite interesting to think about AI progress in the big picture. And I put here one particular index from the Stanford Human-Centered AI Center. And what I would like to highlight in this graph is that if you look at this dashed line, this is essentially the human baseline of the best human performance on various benchmarks. And these benchmarks are various tasks. Some of them are relatively simple computer vision tasks, being able to detect particular objects, but some of them are actually very complicated tasks, like answering PhD level science questions. And if you can see, particularly after 2022, most of the state of the field AI models are actually outperforming humans in terms of their ability to answer these questions. To me, it's very exciting as an AI researcher, but it's also very scary. It's very scary because every single time we advance in AI in a way that it performs a task that we thought was uniquely human in the past, we kind of lose a part of ourselves. It's a little bit like the theoretical arguments of the ancient Greek philosopher Democritus. Maybe some of you science teachers would know Democritus and his thought experiments. You know, he was talking about this idea of thinking about matter and then cutting this matter in half, cutting it in half, and cutting in half to reach a level that you cannot cut it anymore. And he called this piece that you cannot cut anymore atomus, the indivisible. The Greek word is atomus. And this is where we get our scientific concept of atom that we cannot cut anymore. To me, for all of us as educators, as researchers, as policymakers who are involved in AI in education, a core question that we should be asking is what is the fundamentals of a human? Like what is the core of a human that we cannot cut away anymore? You know, what is how much progress is too much progress in AI? What kind of tasks should be always left with human teachers and should be always left with human students and not to be cut away to reduce the human competencies. Of course, this is a philosophical question, but it has very significant practical implications on what we should be teaching people about and what should the role of an AI system be in education. As I mentioned early on, you can think about at least three conceptualizations of AI, and each one of them would have significant implications on the extent to which AI is effective in education. You don't necessarily need to think or get confused with the terminology here, but you can think about these conceptualizations as number one, human tasks are replaced by AI. This is the replacement conceptualization. Number two, human tasks are complemented with AI. So this is the human internalization conceptualization, where you could use AI as an opportunity for humans to interact with and learn from to change their own representation of thought to be able to improve humans. Or you can think about these synergistic human AI systems. As I mentioned, the emergent intelligence of this third conceptualization should be larger than the sum of each agent's intelligences. To simply put it, you can think about these three conceptualizations as replacement, complementarity, and augmentation of human competence. If you put these three conceptualizations on the two coordinates of human control versus automation through AI, it looks like, unfortunately, a lot of the today's implementations are heavily focusing on human tasks being replaced by AI. For instance, there is a very recent research evidence that has been looking at 4 million people's interaction with a cloud AI model. For those who are not familiar with cloud AI, you can think about this cloud AI as equivalent to ChatGPT. It's one of these models that are produced by Anthropic AI, another company like OpenAI. And what they show is that about 4% of the professions actually use AI for more than 75% of their everyday professional tasks. And to me, one of the most worrying results of this report is that actually two types of teachers, foreign language teachers, and literature teachers, are indeed in this 4% of occupations category that appears to be using AI for more than 75% of their everyday tasks. That's a huge percentage. And what is really also interesting is that this usage is not necessarily malicious or having any bad intentions. Teachers are just using these technologies to save time. You know, preparing lesson content materials, generating teaching materials, not necessarily using student data and putting it into these AI that would create ethical issues. But teachers are using these for efficiency purposes to save time, which does make sense. In the report, they also go ahead and look at the percentages of use overall. And what they indicate is that perhaps most of the use cases are essentially automation-related behaviors, and very few percentage of the interactions are augmentative interactions. Here, the augmentative interactions would be things like a teacher creating a draft response to a particular content or a problem, and then use this draft response to interact with AI to be able to improve their initial draft ideas in iterative cycles of Q&A, rather than directly asking the model to create a template or a response to a question. Of course, this is not limited to the textual data only. In my lab, we have been looking at these AI-generated synthetic media. I'm sure you must be also looking at AI-generated synthetic media in your own investigations. And we were comparing the learning gains of students in two conditions. Number one, me recording my video and putting it on an LMS like a traditional Moodle, and asking students to watch these professor recorded videos versus the same content that I want to teach being delivered with AI generated synthetic media. And it's fascinating to observe that there was no statistically significant difference in terms of learning gains in both conditions. So actually, students can learn equally well if the content of what is being said is exactly the same in these AI-generated synthetic media versus human-recorded videos. So perhaps we don't need to waste significant hours of going in front of a camera and trying to record a 10-minute lecture of a direct instruction, and we can use these technologies to save time. Another really frequent example of the use of AI in education is these systems that we are calling as intelligent tutoring systems. I'm confident that some of you would be familiar with these systems, but these are essentially allowing students to work on individually on particular tasks. And the model behind these intelligent tutoring systems tries to create appropriate adjusted content that is aligned with the current mastery level of an individual student. It also adjusts the feedback according to the needs of an individual student, and it adjusts also the pace of progression according to the needs of an individual student. These kind of tools have been argued to provide significant benefits to individual students for these reasons of adaptive content provision, real-time feedback and recommendations, personalized one-to-one tutoring, and instant error correction. And if you look at the literature of the use of these intelligent tutoring systems, the evidence is actually quite clear. On the topics that they are used to teach, mainly these are STEM subjects, the science or maths, algebra content. They actually can be very effective in terms of the students' learning gains. This evidence is both at the individual studies level, but also at a meta-reviews level, where you would combine many individual studies together to create a meta-level investigation. And more recently, these intelligent tutoring systems are using large language models like GPT-4o, and then trying to deliver similar one-to-one tutoring. Existing evidence on the LLM-based intelligent tutoring systems is relatively low because it is just emerging. We have been doing some benchmarking studies on looking at the large language models like ChatGPT's capability to deliver similar adaptivity to a traditional intelligent tutoring system. And we observe that they are not as good as the traditional intelligent tutoring systems, but they are likely to generate learning gains for individual students, perhaps not at the effect sizes that we have been observing for intelligent tutoring systems. Another interesting line of investigation is looking at the use of AI for generating feedback for students. I put here a few experiments from our own lab here at UCL, for instance. For various courses here, we have been looking at student assignments and looking at each student's response to an assignment question, and then generating three different feedback. One is AI generated, one is human teacher generated, and other one human teacher working with AI generated feedback. And then asking students to judge the quality of these three different types of feedback. After these evaluations, we were revealing the original source of feedback, whether it is AI, whether it is human created, whether it is human AI created together, and then asking them if they would like to change their initial quality evaluations of these feedback. And it's fascinating to observe a couple of emerging findings. Number one, if the students do not know the original source of feedback versus if they know the original sources of feedback, they tend to give very different kind of evaluation measures. For instance, when students know that the feedback is coming from AI, they tend to judge the quality of this feedback as statistically significantly lower than human feedback or human AI co-produced feedback. But if they don't know the original source of feedback, whether it is coming from AI or humans, they actually tend to judge AI-generated feedback and human AI co-produced feedback as statistically significantly better than human feedback alone. So there appears to be kind of a perception-driven evidence here showing that students might actually benefit from AI-generated feedback, but their bias against AI is a barrier against these impacts. Of course, I have been showing you these studies from my lab mainly. These are the ones that I'm most familiar with, but also existing academic literature. But I also wanted to show you evaluations from the field overall, like across the countries. So this particular study, for instance, is implemented in the UK, looking at the teachers who are using ChatGPT versus those teachers who are not using ChatGPT for their lesson preparations. And what they show across 78 representative schools in the UK is that teachers who are using ChatGPT are saving statistically significant more amount of time in their preparation. And this is about 31% of preparation time, which is very, very, very significant in statistical terms. But if you look at the quality of the resources teachers are producing while they are using AI versus teachers are producing without using AI, there was no statistically significant difference between these two conditions. And this indicates that teachers tend to use these AI as an opportunity to save time rather than trying to push forward and trying to improve the existing quality of the resources that they have been preparing anyway. So they tend to fall back into their existing level of quality and use AI for saving time rather than pushing ahead. So, overarching argument that I would like to make here is that these tools tend to be very useful for productivity gains, for saving time. But if you want to improve the practice quality at a scale, then we need alternative conceptualizations of AI. Now, you might be saying that, okay, professor, that's great. Even if these tools are okay to help us use the current practice and keep the quality as it is, but they can help us save time, why don't we just go ahead and implement these tools only for time-saving purposes? To me, time saving is important, but also there are significant issues that we need to still take into account if we are using these technologies for only time saving purposes. And number one is the issue of the reliability and accuracy of these models. Currently, the best performing models are still about 90% accurate, and these are models with web access. So if you look at the accuracy of GPT-4o with the internet access, it's about 90% accurate. But if you look at these recent evaluations of newer models like GPT-o3 or o4 mini, and actually the hallucination rates are much worse than the earlier models like o1 or GPT-4. So there's still this issue about how do we address the hallucination and accuracy of these models. Another issue is associated with the bias that is potentially built in these models. There's a really nice study here that I put where the teachers who are using large language models to generate reference letters for their students have been observing that if the model is asked to generate a reference letter for a female student, they tend to use very different adjectives than if the teachers were using large language models to generate reference letters for a male student. And the problem here is that both references are quite good, but the female adjectives were all about teamwork, interpersonal skills, communication skills of the student, whereas the male reference letters tend to be more about how role model they are, how leadership skills are very strong in these students, and how engineering and STEM related competencies are very strong for these students. So if you ask these models to generate response for a male or a female student, it looks like they tend to generate different kind of responses. Of course, you might say that, well, I'm using these models without introducing any gender in my prompt, which is a fair argument, but we have also been doing various experiments looking at in the gender neutral prompt, so you don't necessarily tell the model whether this content is for a male or a female, and generating counterfactuals in the essay evaluations of the students. So in theory, these essays should be exactly the same in terms of the feedback that they receive, but they still tend to generate a statistically significant different feedback if the male associated words in the essay are more frequent than female associated words. Of course, these kind of bias issues are still significant concerns to be taken into account. Another issue is that a lot of these automation use cases heavily focusing on the use of commercial AI models, and commercial AI models have their own particular issues that are associated with the data privacy, ethical and regulatory compliance, and the fact that these models are not very sustainable and might have significant environmental impact. They also have significant cost and licensing fees. So this work towards more open-ended AI models is extremely important. And in my lab, we have been working on academic, freely accessible large language models rather than only relying upon commercial AI models, because these commercial models come with a huge bag of socio-ethical issues associated with them. Another interesting challenge is associated with student motivation. So as you might remember, I mentioned that intelligent tutoring systems are very effective, but the problem with intelligent tutoring systems is that they do not give immediate responses to student questions. So it's not very easy for a student to interact with these models if they are not motivated to work with these intelligent tutoring systems. So I put here one very interesting example from the Tsinghua University, where they have been building these digital learning environments for each student. So the teacher for each class creates a digital learning environment for their students and adds multiple large language model agents. Some of these agents are AI teachers, some of them are AI teaching assistants, some of them are peers who are sparking more ideas. Some of these are thinkers, some of these are note takers. So individual students are is expected to work with these different agents to learn the content of the course. But what they have observed in the evaluation of this particular system was that those students who already had higher prior knowledge and those students who were highly motivated to engage with these technologies were getting a lot more benefit out of these systems, whereas those low motivation students were not getting the most out of it because they didn't have the skills to interact with these models in the first place. So how do we motivate students to be able to get the most out of these systems is still a significant concern. That brings me to the second conceptualization that I wanted to briefly mention today, which is this idea of using AI as an opportunity to create visualizations of learning processes so that these visualizations can be presented back to students and back to teachers for teachers to internalize these models to change their own representation of thought, to make teachers more improved in their competencies of teaching. Rather than trying to automate and replace teaching tasks, here the goal is to help teachers improve their competencies of teaching with the help of AI. Now, if you think about a teacher competence from a cognitive science point of view, there are so many different aspects of a teacher competence that you can improve. For instance, some of these are associated with the teacher dispositions, their cognition, their memory, their knowledge of the topic. Some of these are associated with affect and motivation. Some others are associated with situation-specific skills, teachers' perception or interpretation of particular issues of a student, teachers' decision-making processes, as well as the actual performance of teacher interventions, the observable behaviors of teachers. And with the help of AI, in each one of these different categories of competence, you can potentially help teachers make improvements in their practice. For instance, in my own lab for the last 10 years or so, we have been looking at these contexts where students are working on open-ended collaborative problem-solving activities as small groups. And while they are interacting with these systems as small groups, we have been collecting various multiple modalities of data in their interactions with each other, but also with the other learning resources around them. Here, our goal is to help a teacher to complement their competence of understanding and supporting students' collaborative problem-solving competencies. Now, of course, at a technical level, these are very difficult models to operationalize, but you can think about an AI not making specific decisions for students or for teachers, but generating visualizations of the learning processes back to the teachers and back to the students. Here, for instance, are some of the visualizations. In my lab, in my teaching, whenever I'm teaching to a small group, whenever these groups are working on open-ended design tasks, at the end of the group session, as a teacher, if the students are allowing me to see, or if the students do not allow me to see, they themselves can have a look at various educational constructs. For instance, they can have a look at their collaborative interactions. Who was following whom? How much discussion has taken place? How much the work of the group was led by only one single student, and how much equality there was in the contributions? What kind of metacognitive challenges students had, what kind of emotional challenges that they had, and what kind of task-related challenges that they had, and what kind of resolutions they could achieve if the type of problem or type of challenge that they're having in this group work is associated with a particular emotion regulation. All of these visualizations are fed back to the students for making their lived experiences of learning more visible to them so that they can regulate their own learning and improve. Now, from a teacher's point of view, we have been observing in most of our research in K-12 schools that many teachers want to help students improve their collaborative problem-solving competencies, but they don't really have the appropriate theoretical training or appropriate competence to intervene and support students on their collaborative problem-solving skills, for instance. Here is a list of particular observable behaviors of effective collaborative problem solving that we have identified looking at the theoretical literature on collaborative problem solving. And we built a large language model that can automatically diagnose these specific behaviors of effective collaborative problem solving. And then this model does not make an intervention to the students directly, but identifies these important labels to be able to present them back to teachers to say that in this particular group, the shared understanding actions were not enacted effectively. And these are the kind of interventions as a teacher you can think about to improve students' collaborative problem solving to move towards more shared understanding. This kind of use of AI does not directly intervene into the learning processes, but helps teachers and students to improve their own competencies through the visualizations or insights that are coming from AI models. Now, that brings me to the last conceptualization, which is this conceptualization of tightly coupled human AI systems. I don't have much time to talk about this, and this is on purpose because currently we do not really have very strong evidence from the literature, from empirical evaluations, that we can actually achieve these tightly coupled human AI systems. That's why I put here the potentially more label. And there is some literature emerging that indicates these kind of synergistic interactions are actually extremely difficult to be achieved in human AI interactions. So I put here this study, for instance, that is a meta review of over 300 effect sizes, so 300 experiments in different labs across the globe. And what they show is that we are actually doing relatively better on average when we are working with AI to be able to improve human performance alone. So this complementarity argument that I was trying to make has significant evidence that we can achieve this kind of complementarity between humans, human teachers and AI. But when humans are working with other AI, they tend to perform significantly worse than the best of humans or the best of AI alone. So this augmentation argument is actually very difficult to achieve. These synergistic interactions are very difficult to achieve, and currently we are not designing very well for these kind of synergistic interactions, and this is a line of work that I think we need to work more towards. It's also interesting to observe that these performance losses are usually in tasks that are quite complicated, like decision-making tasks, whereas in simple tasks like creating content, you can still move towards augmentation. But we all know that the majority of teacher tasks are actually very complicated decision-making tasks. So we need a significant research in this direction on how do we create synergy between human teachers and AI. You might be wondering why I'm so interested in thinking about this third category of synergy rather than only getting by with these two conceptualizations on the externalizing and replacing human tasks versus internalizing AI models for complementary purposes. And the reason behind this is that if we think about these externalizing and replacement of tasks as a viable future direction in education, I think we need to think a little bit more carefully because we can save time with the help of these technologies, but emerging evidence indicates that when students and teachers are offloading their tasks into these AI, there is actually a significant impact on their capabilities of monitoring their own actions. These metacognitive competencies, they might be atrophying in the long term. There's a very nice paper that is labeled as Beware of Metacognitive Laziness that shows some of these line of work, that if we are offloading to AI to save time in the long term, that might be detrimental to our cognitive capabilities. But this is not the only paper. There is another interesting experiment that worked with about 1,600 students across 10 courses. And in this particular paper, essentially, colleagues are showing that the students who are getting direct benefit from AI can achieve high performance in the task, but if the AI assistance is removed, their performance actually decreases compared to those students who did not work with AI in the first place. So that's a very worrying line of work. Again, emerging evidence is indicating both at the observable data studies, like looking at the student and teacher behaviors, but also at the neural level, looking at the brain functions of teachers and students who are working with AI, that these kind of offloading interactions might be detrimental in the long term. On the other hand, if we take the other conceptualization where we are using AI for visualization purposes and using it to help us internalize these good practices, then the AI serves the model of scaffolding human competence. So in the long term, as the human competence improves, you would expect AI use to decrease, which might be more beneficial for the teacher and student competencies. And this direction of how do we move towards synergistic interaction is still an open-ended line of research. And I'm hoping that in the future, we will be observing more practices and more research evidence that shows human competence can grow as our interactions with AI also increases. Now, that's my 39th minute, and I have about 30 seconds to wrap this part of the talk. And I wanted to highlight a couple of key insights from today's talk. Number one, as I was asked to reflect upon the evidence of impact on AI, I can very confidently say that AI has strong potential for enhancing teaching and learning outcomes in education, particularly in the context of traditional intelligent tutoring systems, feedback, and content generation tools. But if you look at the evidence of studies, the outcomes vary substantially across teachers and schools, which essentially indicates that it all is about how you actually use these technologies rather than expecting these technology to make direct impact without the appropriate fidelity measures taken in the design and implementation of these tools. Of course, that highlights the importance of teacher preparedness and teacher confidence and competence in using these technologies. That's why, in my opinion, UNESCO AI Competency Framework for Teachers is a very useful compass to think about what competencies teachers need to develop in order to be able to make the most out of these technologies and show the actual real world evidence of their impact. Another really important point is that the productivity gains with the help of these technologies, which is saving time with the use of AI, is indeed relatively easy and straightforward, but there are still significant issues with regards to qualitative improvements in practice, and we also need to be aware of all these four major points that I have highlighted in the talk. So it looks like rather than considering AI as an opportunity to use and replace particular teaching tasks, considering AI as part of a larger learning experience that complement teachers can present greater opportunities to improve learning outcomes. And if anyone asks you, you went to this session on the effectiveness of AI in education, what is the evidence of impact about the effectiveness of AI in education? You can, I think, easily answer this question by saying that such arguments are way too broad to be sensible and academically accurate and scientifically accurate. And you can say the answer is yes, but it depends on variety of ecosystem conditions, design features of the AI, instructional strategies, teachers' confidence and competence in using these, as well as the bespoke pedagogical features of AI. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to having a nice discussion.
Thank you so much, Professor Chukurova. First of all, it was very informative. And more than that, we love that you have summarized it in your last slide. It's very useful for our teachers. And also the clarity that we have after your session today about the effectiveness of AI in education tools. I'm not sure if you had time to look at the chat box. It was flooding with a lot of opinions and, conversations among the participants. So let us invite some of them. So I see that our participants from New Zealand and Australia, you have been very vocal, as well as Singapore, Indonesia, and Latvia. Anyone from here would like to take the floor first? Oh, wow, I see a lot of hands raised. Natalie, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, Professor, for such a wonderful presentation. I enjoyed every second of it. What you gave was a lot of quantitative support to what we are seeing in our classrooms in Australia, particularly around the fact that students are criticising if they know that it has been AI generated in terms of their feedback, and they go straight to trying to critique it rather than trying to use it. And if they don't know, I think you're right. I think they think it's better. So that's what we're seeing. We're also finding that our weaker students are the ones that are not very good at using AI. Our strong students do very well, and they also use it to the point where they can't be detected. But our weaker students, unfortunately, it helps them a little bit, but unfortunately they then get caught on plagiarism. I suppose my one question I wanted to wrap to is I work in a school which is grade 5 to 12, so 10 to 18-year-olds. And what we're grappling with, we're an effective thinking school. We do a lot of collaborative work, and we really focus on building critical thinking skills. Our big thing we're focusing on is what is the age appropriate, or whether you've got any data on, that age, when should they be starting to look at it. We're thinking 5 and 6, grade 5 and 6 is too young, but we would be interested in your thoughts on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalia, for brilliant comments. I already shared the slides with Jyoti, but if you, and most of these studies should be publicly accessible, but if you can't have access to any of the papers for evidence on these arguments that you just pointed out, which resonated with your practice, just drop me an email. I can download it from my university account and send it to you. Don't get blocked behind the paywall, because they charge
Wonderful, thank you.
so much for downloading these evidences. With regards to your question, it's a really interesting one, because I'm not a developmental psychologist. My background is initially in computer science and engineering, and I did my PhD in learning sciences. I'm a more cognitive scientist, so I would not necessarily be able to give you evidence-driven argument on the age appropriateness. But as part of my UNESCO hat, a UNESCO International Expert hat, I have been part of various discussions about regulatory decisions on these fronts. And it looks like the current evidence indicates the age 13 to be the kind of appropriate age where students are developing a sense of agency and an appropriate level of protection of their own agency. And below this age, it might not necessarily be appropriate. And there are significant trust issues below this age. They tend to be a lot more conducive towards accepting what has been said to them. But as I said, I'm not a developmental psychologist, so don't take the 13 age as scientific evidence, but that is what has been presented in these international discussions. And UNESCO and my expert group has been trying to push these kind of regulations. So I don't know how realistic this is and how practical it is, but that's the kind of age. And I didn't give years because in different countries, different school systems have different, but age 13, I think people would be able to make the equivalent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Now let's invite our participant from Portugal, Maria Silva, for her question.
Thank you, Jyoti. I would like to thank Professor Kukurova for your interesting presentation and for sharing the studies, because this is what we really need now. I have a question. The first question was asked by Natalie, and thank you, because I really needed that as well. And the other question is related to the practical use of generative AI tools by teachers to ease their tasks. Some teachers, according to the study that you presented, reported that these tools help them save time, and we all agree with that. But the question is, with the fact that that the study, I think I read it well, it doesn't decline, or at least there was no evidence of a decline of quality. And my question, which is raised, is about the criteria or the forms of evidence which were used to support this conclusion. Because personally, I find it actually, it takes even more time to prompt and redefine the output, especially when I'm trying to generate personalized and meaningful feedback for students, because it's not about the closed questions, multiple choices, but when it's open-ended questions. And so if some colleagues feel that this helps them save time without affecting quality, I wonder what kind of evidence are used.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Maria Silva. Thanks for this. Frankly, in this particular study, it's a trial of a randomized control trial, and their primary interest was quantitative measures on the amount of time. So there is a lot more work to be done with regards to actually understanding how did teachers interact with these models, looking at the logs of their interactions to have a better understanding of the process of these generations. Because if it is just simply saying, draft me a lesson plan for year 6, then yes, it's very easy to create a template and but we all know the quality of these varies broadly, and it might require significantly more amount of work to edit this rather than doing everything from scratch. So they haven't really looked at these processes of interactions, what prompts were put in, how many times it was iterated, how much time they spent while they were trying to make it better. None of these are metrics that have been used in this study. I think it would be very interesting to have a look at them. And probably that also depends significantly on two things. Number one, what AI are you actually using? For instance, subscription-based models in the ChatGPT example 4.5, for instance, has a much larger context buffer, and the accuracy is much better. And these deep search features help a lot with regards to accuracy checks through the internet. But if you're using a freemium version, then the model's quality is much lower. It also depends on the kind of model teachers are using, but also it depends on the competence and confidence of teachers. Some teachers are just so much better naturally, either their particular interest in this space or their motivation to learn this interesting technology for other purposes in their lives. So none of these kind of nuances were discussed. I think a lot of these are to be further evidenced. What you are suggesting that it might actually be not very beneficial in terms of time saving is certainly an open question to be investigated further. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with this at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. Now, In order, first Susanna Thomas from New Zealand, then Michael Harvey from New Zealand, then Angela from Latvia.
Thank you so much. There was amazing presentation, so much to take away. I can't wait to get all those references. Really interesting. I'm leading whole school AI integration, and last week on the 20th of June, Gemini has come with an update there is now open to all ages, including Notebook LM, and it's based on Learn LM, which is based on the science of learning, and he kind of acknowledges it is the most aligned model to pedagogical AI. I'm just interested to see if you have done any studies aligned to Gemini and what your thoughts are, and also relating to Natalie's question around age restrictions now that everything is open. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Susanna. I mean, as I mentioned earlier on to Maria's question, I think the AI model's capability is the key. It's extremely important here. I know LearnLM work quite well because of the colleagues who have been working on it, our colleagues from AIED community, and we were in touch and discussions. I know that they have been trying very hard with regards to the fine-tuning of this model to behave more like a tutor. But I personally have not done any evaluation studies, and I haven't seen them doing robust impact evaluation studies either. I showed a benchmarking study, I don't know if you have noticed, where we were looking at the adaptivity capabilities of traditional intelligent tutoring systems like Mathia or Carnegie Learning in comparison to LLMs, particularly a couple of open source LLMs, but GPT-4o. And we have observed that the adaptivity capability of the large language model is inferior to traditional intelligent tutoring systems, which makes sense because these intelligent tutoring systems are traditionally built on three different models. One is a learner model, looking at the mastery. One is a domain model. You would actually build a separate model of progression. And the other one is the pedagogical model. So it's a superior approach to build these three models. And there are colleagues who are also looking at different advancements, like using knowledge graphs, where you would build a domain model as a source of information for LLM to pull it out. But these are all just emerging, so I haven't really seen an evaluation of Learn LM and how it differs in terms of impact in comparison to human tutors, in comparison to traditional intelligent tutoring systems, and in comparison to vanilla AI like ChatGPT. My hunch is very clear that it would be superior to vanilla AI, all of these models that are not fine-tuned, but that's an hypothesis. We need to test and evidence.
Thank you, Susanna. First of all, we have 3 minutes, but we have a lot of questions, and I think the conversation that's happening is very, very brilliant and important as well. Can I check, Professor Chukurova, do you have, if we go over time, is that okay?
I have 15 more minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
If it was evening, I could have stayed much longer, but it's daytime for me and I have other meetings. Unfortunately, I have to run.
No worries, but we really appreciate that extra time. Thank you so much. Okay, so we will first hear from Mike, then Angela, then Ava from Singapore, then Nomi from Mongolia.
So it's key stage 3, primarily your students. Okay, so that kind of goes with the other question I was going for then. So the other question I had was, so you're basically measuring success within an exam framework, being the UK. So how they're doing with exams. Okay, so other skills like creativity or critical thinking aren't really in that. It's all through the kind of model of an exam.
No, is the short question, Mike. And
Right.
I think they should be. It would be fascinating to look at the impact on these kind of to me more important outcome measures. But people usually start from these more traditional outcome evaluations and move towards more complex outcome evaluations, mainly because of the challenges in the assessment of these competencies in the first place. How do you build a reliable and valid instrument to do this is always, under discussion, but I think it should be done. Absolutely, Mike. Really, really important question and line of work.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Mike. Angela?
Yes, hello. Once again, thank you. I was really happy to hear some of your findings, which I felt intuitively that it should be this way, but you made a clear point of it, which is really, really good for us. And I once again wanted to say what I said in comments, that I was happy to see that the quality of preparation materials in a shorter time was as good as before, meaning that we can rearrange the way we work because we all have to change. Old methodology is not longer applicable in the age of AI. And this means that we can be more creative. We can spend more time with the students who need help. We will be more motivators. We will be more guidance function people. Yes, we will not be just delivering material, which is very good for us. And AI helps with the routine job. But what I see also as a teacher trainer, that due to lack of digital skills, a lot of teachers are struggling with AI. And that's why we need new tools. So I believe that very soon, and I'm also a co-founder of a company which in EdTech, so very soon we will see solutions which are developed especially for education. And here the quality will step in. So we're no longer using general models, but we will specify and come to the good outputs. And here what you said about the infrastructure, about what tools do you use here, I believe that the output and this collaboration of AI and human in education will be very good soon. And as we no longer need to learn to know how to ride a horse, as we still measure our cars in a horsepower, but we don't need that skill anymore. So hopefully soon we will be finding a meaningful use of AI in education and not to be scared of it anymore. Thank you.
Thanks for the comments, Angela. Yeah, I do appreciate it. I mean, to me, it goes without saying that these models that are publicly currently available to most people are fine-tuned to be user satisfaction tools. That's their main purpose. They're not fine-tuned for educational purposes. And as we move towards this direction of building bespoke AIs and LLMs, I think there will be more progress. You're absolutely right about this. LearnLM is one of these good examples, but LearnLM mainly functions for tutoring purposes, whereas teaching competence is so broad. So we need many more of these for specific tasks and contexts. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. So since we are already running over time, we will close the session with next 3 questions. So that's Eva, Nomi, and Orno. So Eva, you first.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so are there any studies or references that you may share showing evidence that the LLMs, the intelligent tutoring, can help teaching and learning of humanities like literature, geography, history, citizenship studies, and languages, especially English language? And I think my students and the teachers, because the teachers are involved in teacher training, want to know which model works best for humanities and languages. For example, GPT-4o or O3 or O1. How do you keep up with awareness of which model currently works best? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Brilliant question. Number one, with regards to these domains, I think they are a bit too broad. So what aspects of humanities, what aspects of language are you trying to improve needs a little bit more specificity for me to be able to say whether AI has evidence or not. For instance, in the language learning context, There are significant studies showing the impact of AI-driven retrieval practices and adaptive learning platforms on verbal content acquisition, learning more number of words in different languages, or language proficiency in terms of the oral competencies of pronunciation. So these kind of evidences exist. But language learning, as you are probably more expert than I am, is much bigger than this. Um, uh, Oral language competency comes with a whole package of understanding a culture in which this language was developed. So if you are trying to evidence the impact on such large scale, I don't think we have many examples of these, unfortunately. But as I said, if it's a bespoke, a very clearly defined outcome in these domains, then there's indeed, research studies showing impact. For instance, if you are in the area of humanities, and if you're interested in argumentative essay writing, then there is evidence in argumentative essay writing. But now I cannot say anything about humanities as a domain broadly. It's too broad. And with regards to the accuracy of different and newer models, it's extremely difficult to stay on top of what's going on exactly. But what I would suggest is that in my presentation, actually, I put a table from a recent OpenAI technical report. These companies nowadays are almost always putting the evaluation results of their models. And I would look for the evaluation results. For instance, currently, O3 and O4 mini have statistically significantly more hallucinations and less accuracy than previous models like O1. Of O3 has about 43% hallucinations. Like that's extremely high. But if you compare to O1, it's about 16%, for instance. And there are various reasons behind why newer models are actually less accurate and more hallucinating. There isn't much time to get into this, but I can maybe do another session on more technical aspects of why these reasoning models are more hallucinating. The point that I wanted to make is that please have a look for evaluation and benchmarking results of these models to have a more informed idea. And don't just look at internet and social media. Everybody's an AI expert on social media these days. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Nomi?
Thank you. So thank you so much for such an insightful session. It was really relieving because I'm one of those many teachers who wants, more time on creative and social interactive activities for my students. Well, since teachers somehow are allowed to use AI in an ethical way, how about students? What do you think that students should use AI somehow? To what extent? And yeah, so that's the question for me.
Thank you very much. That's a really interesting, of course, discussion. I think a lot of the things that I mentioned, I would argue, are relevant to human learning. For instance, this idea of cognitive atrophy, metacognitive laziness, the uses of AI that would lead to offloading of important cognitive tasks to an AI being harmful in the long term are valid regardless of the user being a human teacher or a human learner. So some points are indeed overlapping in the discussion. To me, there needs to be a sober discussion about the future of assessment and how do we actually evaluate student competencies in general and how education systems have been dealing with the assessment in general. And there, I think there are significant implications on what we should be assessing in student learner interactions with AI, because I wouldn't necessarily argue for not using AI at all. I don't think that's a wise way forward. I think we need to be thinking about number one, teaching students about the potential detrimental impacts of misuse, so they have the awareness of this. Number two, showing them more productive ways of engaging with AI. Like I was giving this example of, asking them to initially generate their own responses and then working with AI to improve their own responses. You can build irrelevant pedagogies. You can think about learning sciences principles that we know have been established in long years of research. For instance, productive failure. You know this pedagogy works from a human learning point of view, and then we can think about implementing LLM into this pedagogy, not changing the pedagogy because there is this technology now out there. So you can ask students, for instance, to come up with their own hypotheses of a particular scientific observation in the context of science teaching, rather than asking them to use AI to generate the hypotheses. And then you can ask them what they would be observing if a particular simulation was run. But you can use AI with regards to how to generate the simulation with the students. So there are certain parts in an effective pedagogy that you would expect only the learner to do alone. And there are certain parts where the learners can work with an AI, and that's okay. So finding this balance is I think, the solution, not really trying to ban these. I also think at last, we need to find ways of assessing, that's the third part, assessing students working with AI, and how do we assess productive interactions with AI. Like we need to embed these into our assessment structures, because these are very important competencies, relevant today, will be even more relevant in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Nomi. Now we have the last question from Orno from Indonesia.
Okay, thank you for the time. And I usually use quizzes on creating assessment. And my question is, when I use that quizzes AI, there will be especially on easy and easy question, they just highlight on the keywords, that we write on the answer key. And how should we approach the limits of AI like that in quizzes, in offering formative feedback without oversimplifying the learning? Or do you have any other apps that may be more proper in using this easy question? Thanks.
Thanks, Arno. You were breaking up a little bit, so I'm not sure if I understood your question. So are you asking, you are using, sorry, can you paraphrase, or can someone else paraphrase if someone else understood the question much better than I did? I'm sorry, Arno, like you were breaking up a little bit.
In subjects where answers are not black and white, like writing, design, or philosophy, how should we approach the limits of AI in offering formative feedback without oversimplifying the learning?
Actually, Arno, could you type your question in the chat box? From our side also, you are breaking up. We can't hear you properly. So when Arno is typing his questions, Professor Cukurova, any concluding thoughts based on all these comments and questions that you have had?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's brilliant to see how engaged everyone is. I mean, these are very thought-provoking questions. I appreciate the time you have taken to join this. And yeah, I was quite impressed actually with the depth of the questions as well. So thanks for all your time. I know how busy teachers are, you all are. So thanks for taking the time to join this session. I appreciate it.
Okay, we have Arno's question in the chat box. In subjects where answers are not black and white, like writing, design, or philosophy, how should we approach the limits of AI in offering formative feedback without oversimplifying the learning?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are so many subjects where there is no black and white responses. Frankly, I wouldn't necessarily change what we know from effective pedagogies just because now we have this technology. How we have been approaching to this situation usually has been that we would generate multiple responses and present these different points of views to the student and help them improve their critical thinking and understanding. And I think just because we have LLM and in these large language models, we should not really be changing our effective pedagogies. It should be exactly the same. And maybe AI can generate one more of these potential responses, and students, teachers can start critiquing the validity and appropriateness and correctness of these responses. As I mentioned early on, to me, just because we have AI, that doesn't mean that we should forget everything that we know from learning sciences and effective teaching pedagogies, and we should try to integrate.
Thank you, Orno, and thank you so much, Professor Chukurova, not only just for this brilliant session. I think our participants, they have learned a lot, but we also highly appreciate your generosity with your time. We know how busy you are, so really appreciate it. Thank you. And I think our participants, they appreciate the kind remarks about how busy they are, but still they are learning, and then they are trying to make learning environments better for their students. And this capacity building is a 7-month-long journey. So so it's a huge commitment from their side, and for that we really appreciate the support and knowledge that experts like you are sharing with them. So we wish our speaker a lovely day in London, and then we will get back to our update. So thank you so much, Professor
Have a great day. Much appreciated. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so our exciting announcement is that we have the teams. So in total, we have 15 teams, and we are going to send out the team introduction email from tomorrow onwards. And our goal is to send all the team introduction email tomorrow. So you have a mentor, and you have either 3 or 4 team members. So of course, as you know, depending on Asia-Euro balance, depending on gender balance, you had to consider, all these aspects. But the great achievements this time in terms of teaming from our side is that, we have been receiving this feedback that most of you want to work in the team of teachers who teaches the same subject, or at least in the areas of the similar subject area. So based on that, we can give you a very quick update, a couple of areas. So for example, we have a few teams under social science, majority teams under STEM, because most of you are STEM teachers. And then we have 4 teams for language, because also most of you are coming from this area as well. And then we have interdisciplinary team. Why interdisciplinary? Because some of you, for example, we have only one participant teaching business studies, right? So, and there are other participants, 1 or 2 teaching different subjects. So we put them together, and then we put them under interdisciplinary. However, don't worry, those of you who are in interdisciplinary team, any questions you have about how to approach the topic, how to approach your ITP, we will be there for you. We will support you together with your mentors, so don't worry. And yes, next session on Monday, 30th June will be the last official live session. So of course, you'll miss this afternoon session time every Monday with you all. But hopefully all of you can make for this last live official session, because it's very important. Why? During this session, you will meet your team in a breakout room. Of course, you will know who are your team members tomorrow, but during this session, you will have a conversation with your mentor and your team members, and you will have a team assignment, which will be on initial ITP design. So for all these details, please look out for this email from us, an introduction email together with the ITP assignment details, and then we will take it from there. So, as usual, if you are in Europe, have a good morning and have a great day. And if you are in Australia and New Zealand, have a good evening. And if you are in rest of Asia, have a lovely afternoon. Thank you so much. We will see you on Monday, 30th June.